the honor of introducing our last speaker. So Dr. Joe Walther was a professor here in the Department of Communication and of Telecommunication, Information Systems, and Media at Michigan State from 2006 to 2014. So I tried to get a little bit of like inside scoop to find some fun fact to share. And what his former advisee told me, who may or may not be branded, his former advisee told me that he thought Joe was so nice until he really read his feedback very closely. But yes, he's very, very kind. He is also a distinguished professor and a Bertelsen Presidential Chair in Technology and Society at the University of California, Santa Barbara. And he is currently a visiting scholar at Harvard at the Berkman Klein Center for Internet and Society. A Fulbright Scholar, ICA Fellow, and NCA Distinguished Scholar, his research focuses on the impact of interpersonal and intergroup dynamics in the attitudes and behaviors people develop via mediated interaction in personal relationships, groups, and interethnic conflict. So it is with my great honor that I introduce our last speaker, Dr. Joe Walther.
Thank you all for the invitation to come. It's a pleasure and an honor for me to be here. It really is. It really is. I am kind of cheating though because I've done this before. This is the 2005 Bowling for Scholars, and Sandra and I came, and Chuck and Sandy were our teammates. Dave Westerman was on our team, or helping also. There's one thing different about me now than I was in this picture, is I don't hear very well anymore. So we've decided during the Q&A today, I've prepared quite a number of answers, and you're welcome to go ahead and try to guess the question. If we're lucky, it'll line up, and if not, it'll be amusing in some particular way. The next thing I need to do is something I think Chuck would have done, but not in the way Chuck would have done it. Let's see. Joe Walther started his college education in Santa Ana, California. And after 2 years, he went to Saddleback College, about 20 to 40 minutes south of there, also in Southern California, at which point he went to the University of Arizona, where he took his bachelor's, his master's, and his doctoral degree. His first job then was in Norman, Oklahoma, at the University of Oklahoma, where he escaped quickly to a position as an assistant professor at Northwestern University, 5 years there, and then for a period at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in Troy, New York. From there to Cornell University in Ithaca, New York, followed by finding his family finally a sabbatical so I could have coffee with Allison Eden in Amsterdam, and then a return to Michigan State for another period. And then probably the longest move to go work for Chuck Salmon again, but this time in Singapore at Nanyang Technological University. And after that, it was to our permanent current home, and that's at University of California, Santa Barbara. But for the second time in my life, I'm taking a sabbatical, and that takes me to Harvard, where I'm spending the semester. So that's where Joe Walther got his education. We'll be talking about online hate today, and that comes in many forms. I haven't found any reason to exclude any of these forms yet from the work I'm trying to do, but it's comments online about that are racism, reflect religious bigotry, sexism, and so forth. And they come in these very many forms. And this is it's a tragedy. You know, I'm trying to be a scientist about it, but it's a tragedy, and I think it's a problem. And as we go through the talk today, this is a trigger warning. I want to show you some things that are they're extremely offensive and disturbing, and please understand they're given in the context of trying to understand what we're doing. If anybody is opposed to looking at racist or insulting statements on that basis, this would be a good time to close your eyes or not stay. Anyway, this is something we need to go. This week, things are very, very busy on some of the social media platforms as far as hate. This is almost amusing. It's a posting showing that our country's attention has shifted from being obsessed with Ukraine to obsessed with Israel and sending money to the latter rather than the former. But this is relatively benign compared to other comments. And it's interesting because these issues get conflated. It actually turns out, as you can see from this posting, that both Zelensky and Putin are Jewish, and so it really doesn't matter who we're supporting in that regard. And Zelensky particularly is like the worst kind of Jew. He's a Jew who's also a Nazi, apparently, according to this other posting. And these are real postings from social media. This one, I think, this is from a couple of days ago. We need to work with Hamas to cleanse the world of Judaism and so forth. And there's other I can show you are demeaning to Palestinians and Arabs. You can imagine what those look like. No need to go on at this point. So this is kind of the domain we're looking at, and it's really sad that I can update these slides any given day of the year to find something disgusting to look at. So my own background, for those of you who are not familiar, is that for 30 years I've been studying the internet and what helps people get along well with each other on the internet. How do people form impressions, develop positive regard, develop relationships, make friendly groups, reduce prejudice, all the nicest things you could try to get out of internet interactions. And my most recent studies, online hate, racism, sexism, nationalism, probably the worst stuff you could try to squeeze out of the internet. And so you might be asking yourself, like, who beat you up? Or have you changed your interest? And the answer to that is no. I think there's a common thread, and that's where I want to take you today. So what we're going to do today, well, I'll get to what we're going to do. The foci of online hate research, to me, looks like this. People study its pervasiveness, how many people have been exposed, and so forth. Number two, what's the content, either from computational linguistics or other kinds of content analysis. What are the effects on victims or those who observe? And finally, less so, trying to study the perpetrators and their motivation for doing this. Usually they're just dismissed as bad actors, and so there's not a whole lot of attention to that. Previous perspectives on perpetrators usually take a psychological approach that their motivation is to antagonize people. It seems so obvious. That's an act of individual will or pathological issues, or maybe social psychological issues of in-group, out-group dynamics. So this is so typical that you don't need to say anything more than this. It's very well accepted. I'm working on a different perspective, a new perspective, and that argues that the motivation for sharing online hate is to garner attention and social approval from other people online who are resonant with these kinds of thoughts. That the behavior is collaborative and organized, and it is social rewarding to the people who protect it. In other words, this is a communication-based explanation of online hate, pure and simple. So today, first I want to show you some arguments that I think help make the case for looking at online hate as a social process, and to try to demonstrate to you, actually through rhetorical and semiotic analysis and interpretive means, that I think the audience for hate is other haters, not the target so much. Two, briefly, we can talk about social approval theory of online hate, show some preliminary evidence, and finally some new hypotheses and potential applications, and maybe you can help me with that last part. So let's start making a case for looking at online hate as a social process. So the argument would be that the audience is the haters. The audience for online hate is other haters, not the targets. What would support this? First, a lot of online hate is conducted through private codes and symbols that the victims or targets wouldn't even really understand. How many of you know what this means if you see it in a white supremacist or neo-Nazi posting? Very few of you, almost nobody, and that's exactly as it should be. The 14 is very well known among white supremacists as the 14 words: we must secure the existence of our people and a future for white children. Very well known. You'll see it in, sometimes in hashtags, sometimes in handles, sometimes within a message online. 88, you know 88? Jacob does. Jacob.
I just know 1488 is a pretty common call sign for white nationalist
Yeah,
organizations.
common for white nationalists, but I think one of its origins is 8th letter of the alphabet, letter H, 88, Heil Hitler. So, well known among neo-Nazis and white supremacists, not among you. White power worldwide, common acronym. And then the echo, this is 3 parentheses around somebody's names on both sides, indicates that that is a Jewish person or a Jewish role, like Jewish bankers or something. Very commonly known in certain discussion places, not so commonly known among minority targets. And so, you know, I think this is evidence they're talking to each other. Here's an example. You don't have to go very far from East Lansing to find this message from 2020, after the 2020 election. Remember, there was a holdup certifying the election results, and a couple of the board members got to go meet in the White House and so forth. So your Attorney General, I mean, they just threw everything out to discredit the Attorney General, but this is a nice sample of mixing it all up. So you see the echo, you see she's a dirty Jew, and a dyke on top of it, and it's threatening and so forth, and it's unfortunately typical and compounded to see messages like this. So let's continue trying to make a case that the audience is the other haters. Another point of evidence I would offer you is that the conversations are often taking place in insulated spaces with very clear indications of who the audience is, who's the message for. So for instance, this is stormfront.org. This is one of the oldest neo-Nazi sites on the web. It still kind of looks like a 1990s bulletin board. But they tell you right away, welcome to the Stormfront discussion board. It is interactive. Our mission is to provide information not available in the controlled news media and to build a community of white activists working for the survival of our people. They're saying you right on the door to this building who this is for. This is not a place that you go if you're Jewish or black or so forth. This is a place you go if you're a white supremacist. And so they're talking to each other. In more public platforms, this was an interesting analysis in 2008. Where did the political lies and hate messages go when Facebook started enforcing its community standard rules? Albright found out you went into Facebook groups. You can't see what's going on in a Facebook group unless you're invited there, and they tend to use graphics rather than text so that the censoring equipment can't detect it. They use screen grabs rather than text. So just as people, embed themselves in more secretive spaces online, they also go to more fringe sites, and it's shown that there's been that there is migration whenever a mainstream platform clamps down on its content moderation rules. People migrate to the fringe sites like Gab and others, of which there are many popular. And this is an example in one. This is a cartoon, and again, this specifies the audience. This is an easy rhetoric analysis. Never forget white men. This is who the message is for. This is a message for white men, that the Zionist Jew is working around the clock to destroy you. So this is not a message to the Jew. This is a message to the white man. So this is all anecdotal and rhetorical analysis, but I think it's pretty clear who the audience for this message is. This is a recent posting, but to me it doesn't look different than anything you would see in the Anne Frank Museum. So there is that. Let me share another argument with you that people engage in participation in online hate because it is fun and entertaining for them. And this is really kind of a repulsive suggestion on its face, but once you think about it, you can't unthink it. So there's this really persuasive and interesting article by Sahana Udupa, and she analyzes nationalist speech in the post-Modi election in India. And she just makes some really fascinating points. What's going on in a lot of the hate messaging? Parodies, lampooning, ridicule, people trying to be funny and witty. And there were repositories for memes and so forth, and contests to see who could be more entertaining. And you see this in American postings also, people trying to be witty and funny. Here's something I found on a site called iFunny. I mean, what's a better clue that people are trying to be funny? but a site called iFunny. So here's some fat shaming. I doubt if anyone cares. I'm currently 189 pounds. I was 383. Bully fat people, we need the push. This is an attempt to be funny. Whether it is or not, that's what's posted. This is from Gab. This is the new N-word meme repository. And this is just disgusting, what's in here. And you can see it's really racist caricature on the door. But here's the welcome message, and this is what I really want to draw your attention to. Thank you all so much for being here. Ask your friends and others to join the group. Just on principle, it's okay to dislike the occasional content. Tolerance being so much the better. But to be honest, most of it is funny as hell. And that's why we're here, to entertain each other and to be funny. Let me give you another argument that the activity of online hate is socially organized, not individual and not random. This isn't just somebody having had it and posting something nasty. This is often a collective behavior. And so this is something Alice Marwick published a number of years ago. She says this is how swarms and pile-ons take place. This is her model she calls network harassment. And I think this is a pretty good model, except that it shows the victim as being one person. And we know a lot of this takes place, that people gang up on one person and communicate to that one person in isolation of others. So phone calls, emails, and so forth, direct messages and so forth. I think as often as not, we're seeing these things conducted in a very public setting. So you're ridiculed and hounded and your name is used, but it's all over the hashtag of Twitter or all over the chain and so forth. And so I think that's a modification. But as one example, in Southern California, this is at Orange Coast College, a professor called Trump's election an act of terrorism. She became the victim herself of terror. You can imagine how that story went. This is fascinating data. This comes from some computer scientists who've been following cross-platform raids. So these cross-platform raids, they take place, this is raised by multiple attackers, and they're instigated in a 4chan, anonymous, really dicey channel against a specific YouTube video, and people will give the link to the video, and they'll give you an explanation of what you might find there or why you ought to go close there. But it's become so routine. Sometimes somebody says, you know what to do, and everyone will go do it. So these computer scientists have done really fascinating co-temporal analysis. How long after this organizing message shows up, do you see a whole lot of messages, comments posted under a YouTube video, which tend to be very, very hateful and so forth. And then, if that's not enough, people return then to the 4chan instigation point to brag about their hate postings. And Gianluca Stringhini is one of the authors, and he and I have been talking. He said sometimes in order to brag about what they did, they take screen grabs of their posting on YouTube or a screen grab of somebody's horrified reaction to it, and they post that in 4chan. Now that's important. That's deliberately trying to get high fives and congratulations, and that's violating the anonymity that's built in into 4chan by taking an excerpt from a platform where everybody has a username. I think this is a terribly important finding. I find it very persuasive that this is a social activity. So those are my arguments for looking at online hate as a social activity, a communicative activity. And that leads me, or is within that context, I've been trying to formulate a social approval theory of online hate. So let's, and it's really very simple, and that is the proposition that hate posters are primarily motivated and gratified by garnering social approval online. They want to get attention, they want to get reward, and they want to develop and maintain relationships with other people, and people don't like to hear me say this. Targets of hate are collateral damage. Let me clarify that because it sounds really insensitive. In a way, I think the targets of hate are, they're offended and they're traumatized. When we talk about collateral damage in war, we're talking about real dead people, and it's sad. But the point of collateral damage is it wasn't the point. They just happened to be in the way. And I think that that's not an imperfect description of what seems to be going on online a lot of the time. So how does this work in social media? Well, we know that there's affordances in social media that can promote social processes like these and social approval processes. So you have follower networks, so you know when somebody you're interested in has committed some communication act, you can go find it easily. Or you're actually notified when somebody has committed a certain type of act, and you can see it or be told about it. These symbols are by and large searchable, and there's keywords so you can find them. And then there's shortcuts to conveying social approval to people online, and you know what these are. So their Facebook has the thumbs up and a number of other symbols. There's Reddit has upvotes and downvotes. Twitter, it has the hearts. And so what's scary to me about this particular real posting is not only the graphic and the WPWW, but the 21 hearts so far that it gathered. So some preliminary evidence that social approval motive and gratification might be operating for online hate we can find somewhere. So and it was thanks to Jacob that I read Brady's work, Billy Brady's work. You tipped me off to this. Very persuasive work. He's followed up on it empirically. So Brady and colleagues have found when people express moral outrage online, the more hearts they get in Twitter, the more outrage they express. So the wording in the article was the more outrage they express. So I know who you are, and you know who I am. We have to look up what that means, right? That's what we do. So this is more frequent postings. After you get a heart on your moral outrage, you post moral outrage more frequently. That's an important thing to know. Here's a study by Schmargod, Steve Rains, Kate Kinsky, and colleagues out of Arizona, and this was done in a newspaper commenting section, very much like Reddit. And when posting an uncivil comment, the more upvotes you get lead to, as they said, even greater incivility. Following that, again, we look at the methods and the data, and that is more frequent in uncivil statements. This is important to know. I think frequency is a very important dependent variable, but so would be magnitude also. And I see this much less often. Not in the study of hate, but in the study of fake news, negative fake news. We did a project that we published last year that starts to show magnitude effects. So this was our study of digital social approval, its effects on perceptions following transmission of fake news. This was a 6-step field experiment. It took forever to do. It was interrupted by COVID, but we finally got it done. The first step, we wanted to do what fake news agents did. So first we had to get a fake news website. We got cmcnewsnow.com. It was $35, and it was live. CMC, as you all know, stands for Consolidated Media Corporation. So we created the fake website, then we had to create fake news stories, which we pre-tested. We had 2 positive stories and 2 negative stories about local elected officials. And in neither case did the names of these local officials match anybody who'd been elected to the California State Senate or legislature. St. Peter's Hospital is real, but it's in Albany, not in Bakersfield. So none of these things line up if you check them. So we have 2 positive, 2 negative stories, and each version has a D version or an R version. It's those subtle manipulations when they have effect that are mind-blowing, isn't it? So the next step before we recruit participants, we had to create fake Twitter feeds with which to promote these fake news stories. So we have fake Twitter feeds also. Then we recruited real people. We advertised on Facebook for people who also use Twitter and asked them if they wanted to participate in a 2-part study for a cash reward. If they volunteered and went through what little we could tell them about the purpose of the experiment, we asked them to read 2 and choose 1 news story to transmit in a quote tweet with a comment that would encourage readers. So pick one of these 2 stories, tell us which one, give us the link to your tweet. And they did that. And so they would do these quote tweets, and they would add their comments, like, COVID reveals these leaders' true colors. Wow, can you believe this? Come on, Senator, gotta do better. So it looked like most people took this pretty seriously and added comments. This is our experimental design. This is our backstage. And I realize this is too much stuff for a slide, so sorry about that. So we have a control condition, and in this we just ask people to choose one of two stories. Don't retweet, just read it, and we'll ask you next week, what you think about the politician. Or we ask you to retweet, and we gave you 0 likes. Or we asked you to retweet, and we gave you 5 likes. Or we gave you 10 likes. Or we gave you 15 likes. Or we gave you 20 likes in equal intervals of 5, just like Judy Burgood taught us to do. So this was our design. And then after a few days, we asked them to go back and look at their tweet, the retweet, see how much engagement it had, and then fill out the scale regarding the official in the story. And the bottom line, almost short story, is that we had pretty much we had the 3-way interaction close to as we predicted. So if you saw the positive story, you thought the person was okay, no matter what else. But if the person was from the opposite political party and it was a negative news story, the more likes you got, the worse you thought of that elected official. So this wasn't about online hate, it was about negative news about somebody who didn't exist, but it was a study showing that there was a pretty much linear effect on magnitude of attitude change due to the number of hearts or likes that somebody got. So that's as far as we've gotten. We don't feel yet, we haven't figured out clever enough ethical ways to do these experiments with haters. But Winston gave me some really interesting ideas yesterday I'm still thinking about a lot. So that's the theory and some preliminary evidence from a couple of different directions. Let me just speculate something crazy with you for a minute. How far does this go, okay? How far does this go if people want social approval for doing the most offensive things on social media? So here's this individual, she's at the Capitol, and here's the big pink arrow on her Facebook post. So all her friends can see what she was doing. And there's an article from USA Today saying, pics or it didn't happen. You don't know, maybe you do. They've arrested so many people who were involved in the insurrection because they posted pictures of themselves on social media. This is me, you can't miss me. This person doesn't look to me like he's trying to stop the peaceful transfer of power. It looks like he's trying to get attention. I don't know. But I think maybe this goes crazy. This is stuff I can't speculate. I'm just curious, just opinion stuff. But I do wonder about it. This is from a New York Times article on Inauguration Day, and it's from a QAnon leader. They all thought that Trump was going to be inaugurated and get rid of the pedophiles. And he says, well, it clearly didn't happen. We have to go on. Just remember all the friends and happy memories we made together over the past few years. It's about relationships. Online hate is something we do for love, not necessarily for hate. So I've been kind of going with this, and the confession is, I don't know how to test a lot of these things. And I've met some collaborators who probably do. And I allowed myself to theorize and worry about the rest later, but that's the first part of the job. The second part of the job is after you've theorized, can you draw any hypotheses, still not knowing if they're testable. So here's how that's going so far. So imagine these conversation spaces. We could probably find them, but I don't know where they are yet. So this is a conversation space where half the people are white supremacists and half the people are minority members. And there's one white supremacist who's about to say some hate messages. So this is one space, it's about half and half. Here's a space where there's one white supremacist and a whole bunch of minority members in the conversation. And Daniel would call this a target-rich field. And here's a space where there's lots of white supremacists and only one minority member in the conversation space. If hate messengers are in it in order to piss off and hurt people, which of these conversation spaces would host more hate messages? Try it. C, would host more hate messages. I think differently. I think if you're trying to hurt people, you want to do it where it's efficient, where you can hurt the most people. I would say A and B, if that's the goal. If, on the other hand, the goal is to get social approval, then what fields? In Mo's pointing, that's great. A and C. Because it's just no fun if your bullies, your bully friends, don't see you do it. Unless you take a screen grab and show them later, it's just no fun if they can't see you do it. Another hypothesis is the simple reward hypothesis, right? The more attention and approval you get, the more hate. The less attention and approval you get, the less hate. And its frequency should be magnitude also. So this is simple and it should be tested. We're actually working on this. But here's a leading up to a counter hypothesis. So there's shadow banning. It's something that some of the platforms do. So you think you're posting, but nobody actually sees it. That's shadow banning. In an article in the New York Times, the reporter says the meaning of the term has evolved. Now it can describe users' general discontent about not getting the attention they believe they deserve on social media. People believe they deserve a certain amount of attention on social media, and what if they don't get it? Then, insufficient attention and approval, more hate. I'm not getting enough likes, saying these nasty things, maybe I need to be nasty. So competing hypotheses, maybe one of them is true. So, do we worry about the one who got 21 hearts, or do we worry about the one who hasn't got any? And what are they going to do next? You can see where this is going. So what I'm trying to do is say, let's look at context, let's look at social media scenarios, let's see how this premise that it's attention getting might apply. So yeah, so here's another one. If they suspend your account, probably bad. If they suspend your account, but you have an account somewhere else, you show it off. So suspending your account might backfire if you're in it for social approval. Applications, this is something they work on at the Berkman Klein Center a lot. What are the implications for content moderation? What are the implications for policy? What do we tell the tech platform? I don't know the answers to that yet, but my suggestion is we need to think about mitigation from a social processes perspective, not an individual perspective. We need to rethink current content moderation from a social perspective. Is account suspension punishment or a badge of honor? Do we interrupt the social network by taking out somebody who's very central or key in a social network? Do we do shadow banning so nobody can provide the likes and engagements? These are potential empirical questions maybe somebody can take on, but we need more questions and suggestions. What does the social processes perspective suggest or imply for content moderation? And this is from this morning. This is from a scholar named Turner who said this morning. If these messages are not just to entertain each other, but are written to provoke anger, now maybe we have a whole other thing to worry about. If these messages lead to people removing barriers to goal attainment and doing something to solve these inequities and the worldwide Jewish conspiracy and so forth, if it motivates their energy, if they want to maintain control of threatening situations, in other words, if they're experiencing the great replacement theory and thinking that it's all the minorities trying to take away the jobs that white people think they deserve, then they feel threatened. They want to regain control. Analytic thinking, I don't know. There's some fascinating research of two different studies that have looked at stormfront.org that finds a general complacency among the old timers in stormfront.org. They think there's nothing you can really do about it. This is how it's always been. This is how it's always going to be. In one account by Anton and Petter Tornberg, they analyzed the chatter when Obama was elected president. And the newbies said, this is horrible. He's a black man. This is an inferior race. And the veterans said, this is just all part of the big Jewish conspiracy. And the black people are working at the behest of the Jews, and there's nothing you can do about it. And so Stormfront is not going to be motivated because they're complacent. Other areas, I don't know. Maybe online hate is a place for the complacent. rather than the activist, I don't really know. That's what we've got so far. So at this point, I welcome your questions and comments, your extensions. I may even answer your question, but it's time for you to take the turn. Thanks very much. Please, I'm coming close. I come to you.
I like this social approval theory, and I have many colleagues who are working on research on social norms. How do you see the connection between the two, and how do you see, you mentioned about social affordances, how do you see norms are created in this process of gaining social approval?
So you said you have many studies, colleagues studying online social norms or studying hate, or both?
Norms.
Studying social norms. What do I think about online hate as a reflection of social norms? That's the question.
Yeah, their connection.
What is the connection? I think there is, well, we know from research there is a strong connection. So this study, particularly by Schmargot and colleagues, they argue very strongly. In fact, they are citing Lipinski all over the place. You can't get through a paragraph without a citation to Lipinski in their paper. And they demonstrate quite clearly that the precedent level of incivility affects subsequent level of incivility. They call that a normative approach. It's not a real long-term, culturally embedded norm. It's very much behavioral antecedent. You were just cited.
Damn it! Walk up for 1 minute.
Anyway, I don't think their treatment of it reflects a culturally embedded long-term norm. It's very behavioral and immediate. But I don't think they're wrong either. So I think there is a great value to looking at this as a norms process, and I think there's a great value, and this is not what you asked, but I think there's great value in looking at this from a social identification perspective, which is in-group, out-group, but I think neither one of them is enough. And the reason I think neither one of them is enough is because these acts of favoriting and liking and commenting are both public and interpersonal behavior. And neither norms nor social identification takes that into account, as far as I know. And I think that's very dynamic. So Caleb Carr and his associates, they've shown that getting approval messages from friends counts more than getting approval messages from strangers. I don't know if that's happening in the online world or not, because I don't know who's friends and who's not. But if we can find that out, we can investigate whether that's happening here also. So yes, norms, yes, social identification, also interpersonal interaction dynamics, that those somewhat more static theories don't reject but are not equipped to study. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
That's amazing. And that's why you got such a long answer. I was stalling. Let's try the next question.
Okay, so my question is about, you talk about social approval, and being a social approval, we're more likely to do hate speeches. But I'm wondering if there is people who have different opinion with us, then is it also make people speeches, or is it make people to think about their reputation from other people? So you show that ABC kind of target people so I was wondering, role of social support, and at the time the role of social disapproval, or think about social desirability or reputation.
I think you mentioned a lot of constructs, and I'm not sure what you're asking about, but I think you didn't ask me where I got such nice shoes. So we're on the right track. So, but could you rephrase that? Maybe focus a little bit more. You talked about social approval. Different people want social attention. I'm not sure about your question.
So if there is after people, and I just after if there is some kind of target people that I hate, that existence of people makes me do less speeches, because I have to think about reputations or desirable. So I was wondering how.
Let me see if I can get close. You're concerned about